So, welcome to the Culture Clash. We are a commentary on contradictions. Okay, we're a organization sitting here between the two of us. We are both organized. If you believe that, we get in a bridge we could sell you. Anyway, but the idea is that postmodern culture, most of what is being taught in our universities, most of what people accept in our day, is the idea that absolute truth does not exist. That what you've got is you've got the personal feelings that you have, you're an individual, and that as an individual you create your own reality. You come up with your own ideas as to what's true, what's not true, and your truth may be different than somebody else's truth. So the idea of an absolute truth is totally wrong. That's postmodernism in a nutshell. Okay, now switch back to the way we were raised, and it's kind of like we are biblical supernaturalists in our worldview. And I think I speak for both of us, that what we believe is that if it's written in the Bible, we have an exterior proof that God has said something, and He's put it into our culture, and we can count on that as much as we can count on the ground we walk on.
I that part for sure, the biblical part, I can't agree with you more. And the reason is it's pretty simple, that if we individualize what truth is, there is no question that we're going to clash, because I'm going to base my truth on essentially what I want and what I like. So if I start doing that and you start doing that, so let's go with this one. I think it would be fantastic to grab a baseball bat right now, so much fun, and go start smashing windshields. Why? Well, because I have an urge. Yes, and that urge must be correct because, it's my urge, and urges can't be wrong. Well, actually, urges are wrong all the time. All the time. And all you got to do is watch a little news and you'll know that your own urges are incorrect most often. And so when people start developing their own truths within themselves, if we all start to individually do that, well, inevitably there's going to be a clash. Maybe that's why we have so much clashing right now as we speak, even though everybody seems to be claiming that we all believe the same thing. Well, how is that possible? Then why all the strife? Right?
Yeah, well, that's obviously not true. I mean, people don't believe the same thing. I mean, even the difference between, Muslim and Christian, and that's using the most common, clash point, I guess.
Even Christians with Christians.
Well, yeah, right? But that's a given. I mean, I don't even go there.
Family never gets along, right?
No, that's right.
We're brothers and sisters in Christ, and that's why we don't get along. Family never gets along. That's the way it is.
That's right. So back to the point of worldview. Okay, we I had mentioned that I said, we think of truth being absolute and as solid as the ground we walk on. What we don't realize, and when we think about that, we talk about this. I'm on solid ground here. That God spoke that solid ground into existence. So the Word of God is more stable than the ground you actually walk on, because you're walking on the Word of God, and people don't make that connection in their heads by and large. I mean, that's something that most people don't do, but it's something that has to be addressed if you have a biblical worldview. So here's the point: it isn't that you have to have a biblical worldview to watch the show. What the point of the show is to show you that worldviews need to be evaluated in their own context. So if, like Shane was mentioning, you have an urge and you think that urge is valid, you think that's important and that everybody should have that urge, or that everybody does have that urge, well, you can test that. You can actually come up against somebody and have a conversation and see if there's total agreement or not. And if there's not total agreement, then there's something wrong with the hypothesis. There's something wrong with what you've said, that you've postulated and said, this is true. Because that can't be true, because it falls apart in itself, in its own rules. So when you look at biblical supernaturalism, we look at that and we say, okay, what is biblical supernaturalism? Well, we believe that all the laws of nature, all the laws of science are absolutely appropriate, that we need to go by what nature says exists, what we find in nature, what we see in nature, with one exception. And that is that there is a supernatural entity that made all that stuff, that orders all that stuff, and who has something to say about it. Now, if that's true, then we have a basis for believing. So we're gonna talk a little bit about that today too.
Well, I mean, the reality is, for me, is we're not the top of the food chain. when we build our homes with rock and wood, we didn't make rock and wood. When we have a glass of water, drink it, bathe in it, cook with it, we didn't make water. We really didn't. We have water. We can study water. But all I have to do is say, hey, Jeff, grab a bunch of H's and 2's and O's and make me some water. We've come to the point where we actually
get your own H's
get your own
and 2's and O's. Come on.
We've come to the point where because we somehow can explain what water is, or what the sun is, or what the moon is, supposedly we can explain these things, that somehow that also means we built them. Well, we didn't. Someone else did. Someone else is ultimately the scientist. So who's the scientist? Well, it's not Bill Nye the Science Guy, I can tell you that. And it's not me. And it's not this lovely gentleman that's sitting next to me. So,
and he forgot my name.
It's Jael. Jael. But it's so awesomely fancy that I feel embarrassed to even say it. I don't know if I feel, you know what I mean?
Just use Jay. It's okay.
All right, Jay. We'll go with Jay. See, Jay. Shade and Jay.
That's it.
Yeah, notice I put shade first? I don't know if you noticed that.
No.
Anyways, you said no. So, yeah, I think that, the fact is that very little of our lives are rooted in any facts that we truly know.
You know what's really fun? I mean, just continuing your analogy there, what's really fun is that tell me that hydrogen, which is extremely explosive, and oxygen, which is extremely flammable, that anybody would put together and then put it on fire to see if it'll go out.
We got to throw a 2 in there, and that fixes everything. You forgot the 2.
Well, yeah, it's just more oxygen. I mean, more of the same thing. So it's a tough, if we were making it, we wouldn't do it. We wouldn't do it the way it's done. So you're right. There's all that. Anyway, back to the point that we're making here about dichotomies, about the idea that there are two sides to an issue and that the one side excludes the other side. This is very important because what's happening in our culture right now as we clash with each other is we are saying on the one hand that according to whatever worldview you hold, that your worldview, first of all, is consistent and worth defending, which I think it's very difficult for somebody who says, I'm only a naturalist to defend it. And I'm going to give you a case in point for that. If all you can find is what exists in nature and what you can prove scientifically, okay, let's assume that that's true. So let me ask you something. Have you ever lived 5 minutes from now? The answer's got to be no. You've never lived 5 minutes from now. Right?
Absolutely not.
I haven't either. So just to be clear. So if that's true, that we haven't lived in the future, we don't know that the rules we see and observe today will exist uniformly or convincingly the same way in the future as they are right now. We don't know that the chair we sit on is going to hold us up in 5 minutes because we've never been there or able to test it. Because we have to scientifically only accept the proof that is testable and provable. Now, we can extrapolate. And so to be fair, I want to go and say that we can talk about that and say, well, we can think that we can make good assumptions. And I totally agree with that. We can make good assumptions. So let me ask you this. Why are things what they are? Why do they have definition? You don't really have a reason for that. There's no reason why things should exist. If they're constructs of your mind, which most postmodernists would say, they would say, no, we create our own reality by the way we think about things. Okay, well, if that's true, why?
If that's true, you're Angelina Jolie. It just happened. Did you see it?
Oh, jeez.
And there she is. Don't you see it? Don't you see it? Because I see it. Don't you see it? I just created a reality.
Yeah. Well, anyway,
back to Jay.
I'm rather glad that his reality isn't going to impose on mine.
What do you mean? It's supposed to impose on yours. You can believe whatever you want as long as it agrees with me.
Okay.
All
right.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
Back to you, Jay.
Back to me. Okay.
Back to you, Jay.
All right. So here we are. Okay. So let's let's look at this. A biblical supernaturalist believes that things are what they are because they read in the Bible that God made things, specifically things. He made them man. He made them male and female. Now there's a big one. We're going to get into that one later because that's a dichotomy people don't want to accept. And there's all kinds of these issues that come out. We believe that God made things what they are. And we believe he made them in a space-time continuum. So we have a basis, being biblical supernaturalists, to actually accept the findings of science. Whereas the scientist who wants to claim atheism has no basis for it, because he's never seen it outside of his time frame. He's never seen it or proven anything to be what it's supposed to be. Why even give something a name if your reality is different than somebody else's reality? That's not logical.
It's not. And really, when you apply it to even, let's say, something really simple, we actually believe it too, that design is when you have a design. So for example, I have a refrigerator. It has a specific design and it functions a certain way for certain things, right? We don't cook our roast beef in the fridge.
You don't?
No.
Oh,
because the fridge was designed to do that.
I knew I was doing something wrong.
You were doing something wrong there.
It's like,
so the idea that there isn't a designer and that we need to follow that design, and that if we don't follow that design and those instructions for that design, that there will not be any kind of implosion of some kind, is about as intelligent as saying, I'm going to cook my roast beef today in the fridge. It's about as intelligent as that from my perspective, because we have to know there's intelligent design here, because, you know, quite frankly, this glass is intelligent design. So this is intelligent design, but the world itself is not. That's a ridiculous position.
well, the world's, not quite as complicated as that glass.
Right, yeah, exactly.
Okay.
So it's pretty interesting to watch. Again, all a scientist might be, and I don't know, have you, truly, like, I'm not even sure what a scientist is anymore, because they've applied science to everything. Political science. Oh, okay, I thought that was politics. Social science. Oh, okay, I thought that was
sociology.
Sociology, right?
Yeah.
So they've applied science to everything. When we're studying the sun and the moon and the stars, supposedly, which, by the way, biblically, you're not supposed to do that. Certainly not for too long. Read Jeremiah.
We'll get into that. That'll be another show, okay?
Yeah, that'll be another show.
Right.
But in studying that, how is that the same as, let's say, quite frankly, a heart transplant? I mean, I just don't even see those two things. When my uncle was having problems with his heart, I saw people come there and help him, and I saw what they were doing, and I saw some amazing work. I don't know how that applies to politics or sociology or, quite frankly, the sun and the moon and the stars. So we're applying the word science to a lot of things, and I think that's lending to the confusion of what we believe science is. There's no absolute truth on what science is, actually, in my opinion. What is science?
I think science does have a definition, and we can go back to the dictionary and get a definition and say,
right. But
this is
that
science.
The definition everybody's applying?
No, because I think, first of all, everybody in our world is approaching the world with greater and greater tolerance for worldviews that basically say you can invent your own truth. I think a lot of people are confused simply because they don't believe that a definition defines anything. They think that they can redefine it for themselves if they want to, and that'll be just fine. And that's really the point of this show today. I mean, we're really talking about why the dichotomies are absolutely exist. So I'm going to pull something else from maybe a different point of view here. There's a guy named Ravi Zacharias, and he's a Christian apologist, and he's a guy who basically has a similar worldview to mine. And so I'm going to talk about him for a second and reference something he said. He was in a discussion one time with a professor of philosophy who wanted to argue the idea of dichotomies. He said, no, the world is not either or. I mean, there is something called dialectic reasoning, in which it's not either this hand or that hand, it's both hands at the same time. Now, the problem with this, of course, is that you can't have something being black and white at the same time. That physically there's a problem there. And people say, it depends on your viewpoint, or it depends on this, depends on that. And you know what? Perspective influences the way we see things, so I'm not going to argue that. I am arguing, though, that what was happening in this argument is that the people who believe that the dichotomy doesn't exist reinforce the dichotomy. Let me show you how. See, as he was talking to this guy, he was saying, no, you cannot have either this way or that way, because that is a Western worldview. You need an Eastern worldview, which tells you it has to be both hands at the same time. So Rabbi asked him a question. He says, so what you're telling me is it's either my way or your way, and it can't be both. You can't have a dichotomy at the same time you have a dialectic, which is actually what we believe. We believe that, yeah, there's dialect, there's more than one choice. Sometimes you can have 3 or 4 options within a choice. That's true. But the fact is there are also things in that same scenario that are diametrically opposed to each other. You can't have one and have the other exactly at the same time, the same way. If you want to take your life and you go through it and you make a choice to do something with the day and it involves driving towards Toronto, you can't be driving towards Chicago at the same time, because those are different directions from here. I mean, I don't know where you guys are in the world, because you could be watching this from anywhere. We're in Windsor, Ontario. This is like the place that's just outside of reality. That would be Detroit, right? I mean, Detroit is the epitome of reality. I mean, it's a place where dog eats dog.
Not everything that is said by Jay is the opinions of this station.
Okay. That's probably true. Probably, but no guarantees, okay? I mean, because I have a reality and he has one, so we're going to make this work. Okay. Anyway, let's get back to normal here.
Oh, that's going to take a while.
I don't know that normal was ever part of our...
power you got there, Jeff? We got to get back to normal. It's going to take a while. I'm thinking at least 100 years, to be honest with you.
It is absolutely wonderful to be on a show with Shade, because I just met this guy, like, I don't know, maybe a month or so ago, and we worked together for the first time musically, and we're both musicians. We both come from that background.
And I was late that time too.
Were you?
Yeah, I think so.
I don't remember.
No, about 5 or 10 minutes. Not a big deal.
Okay, but
it's a musician level of late. It's not.
Okay.
Technically, it's almost not late when you look at it from that. When I create my own reality.
Okay.
Go by my reality.
So anyway, I just want to tell you that this is like a lot of fun, because working with creative people, you're never going to agree 100%, but you're always going to have this great dialogue. And think about that dialogue, right? What is that? That's words that are divided in 2 different points of view. Now that's really interesting. I mean, so what we're saying is that we can't be completely agreed and disagree at the same time, right? I mean, that is the point. And so the idea of postmodernism really falls apart on itself. It isn't real, and people who live in that reality have a problem. The only reality we've seen naturalist points of view, and through history we've had different levels of, the idea of defining philosophy in certain ways. But the postmodernist idea is just plain, it doesn't hold up in its own rules. You can't get it to make sense out of its own rules. It falls apart. So anybody who wants to claim that as their thought base is going to struggle. Because they're not going to come up with a reality that is convincing to themselves.
And if this postmodernism was actually good, or accurate, if you will, or could work, then why the increase in anxiety? Why the increase in depression? Why the increase in divorce? Why the increase in strife across the board, whether we're talking on small levels day to day on the road, from road rage all the way to why are we still talking about wars? So this kind of thought process is clearly not working.
So watch the show, because we're going to solve all those problems, okay?
Yes. and the interesting thing is that I think that's, if I may be so bold, the problem is people think that people can solve the problem. Let me paint a little picture here. I've had discussions with people say, well, because of mankind, we created things like pollution, and now that's affected, for example, the weather, the big climate change, global warming controversy. So I'll say, well, okay, so how do you suggest we fix it? With people? Because it's, according to you, the people that did the bad thing. So ultimately what you're really saying is somehow those people over there did bad things, and us people will fix what those bad people did. Yeah, that's not going to work, because ultimately human beings, you're claiming, are the problem, and you're going to try to solve the problem created by man with more ideas from man. Bad idea. It's like taking a plumber who's screwed up your pipes and call him back to fix them. If he's not good at it, he's not good at it. How about this too? The idea too that somehow we're the ones who are ruining this world, and so we're going to fix it. But yet those same people believe the world has been here for billions of years. Well, if it's been here for billions of years, who was controlling that show back then?
Oh, dinosaurs.
Right?
Dinosaur, absolutely.
And you know what?
Yeah.
Dinosaurs had it right. They didn't do weird stuff. They followed their design. That's what they did. I've never seen a female lion carry a sign and say, you know what? I'm not going to go get any food for my husband anymore. That's it. He can get his own food. That's it. Protesting. The lionesses protesting the lions. In fact, if it did happen, I'm pretty sure the lions ended up eating the lionesses. I'm pretty sure that's how that went.
Okay. All right.
The idea of following the design. You don't see. We have such love and respect for animals, but they don't argue with each other. They just do what they're meant to do.
Yeah, but when you got on lions, I was looking for the main point. Okay.
Oh,
never
Maine.
mind.
I get it.
Good.
Okay, that's a
Because
moment where I
people-
get to fluff my hair because you said Maine. Anytime someone, it's MK Ultra mind control. Every time you say Maine, I go okay, fluff hair.
That's good.
Sorry.
That's good. I mean,
I recommend that Mel Gibson movie, Conspiracy Theory. Go back and watch that movie. It's funny.
Very good. Very good. Okay. So anyway, to make a long story short, I guess. And we kind of need to, be looking at, some parameters on the show, probably.
Parameters.
Like
don't limit me, man.
That we actually, kind of bring things to this conclusion, right? So here is if I had to bring things to a conclusion on a pilot here to kind of this is a cool discussion, and we want to do more than one, so we're probably going to shoot them all in a row, so we don't have to get out of this really cool interaction that we have, and we can continue on, but we got to bring it to a conclusion for the viewers who want to take this in bite sizes, and I appreciate that you want to take it in bite sizes, and you may not have an hour to sit down and watch a show. So but the real there was something I was going to say there. Do you remember what it was? No?
Well, you were going to say, hey Shade, why don't you say something?
Oh yeah, that's exactly it. Okay. Give me a second. I am trying to wrap this up.
This is no longer on film; it's digital. So take your time. It's okay.
Yeah,
it's fine. No big deal.
That
really.
works.
No wonder they won't tune in for an hour.
Yeah, of course.
I mean, honestly,
who would watch this? Really?
They'll watch Game of Thrones every single week, watching people slice each other up all day. But no, not. They don't want to see you go. Geez, what was I saying? I was saying something. I just don't remember.
I was thinking about it.
It was something. Yeah. It was something.
So
I don't remember.
Right.
You want to make a conclusion out of this?
Yeah, but I don't know how anymore. It's like I was like, okay, we were having so much fun.
The world is so messed up. That even we're confused.
The problem is that we were having so much fun that we forgot the purpose for which we assembled here.
Some joy. Let's be joyful. I'll tell you. I'll give you a good finale.
Okay, go ahead.
Maybe that's why Jesus said, "I am the truth." I mean, when you really think about that statement, what a wild statement. I mean, Jay, if I said, by the way, I am the truth, what would you think of that statement? It's an incredible statement. And the truth is outside of ourselves. And if we don't humble ourselves and start to recognize that there is a creator and that there is a design and that he showed up 2,000 years ago to prove that to us, and there is more evidence of the existence of Yeshua HaMashiach, Jesus Christ, than there was of Caesar, by the way. Mm-hmm. Okay? Maybe that's why he said, I am the truth. Maybe that's why he said it, because he knew one day we were going to actually have a lot of difficulty figuring out what is true.
That's a really good point. I just want to bring this up, I guess, and that is that what we see here is we see that our culture has divided, that the people who claim that dichotomies are not an issue are the people that are most opinionated and will not allow for the other position. And yet we seem to see that things are divided into two different camps. And we see that in most cases there's a line that splits between good and evil, wrong and right, black and white, however you want to say it. And what we're doing is we're, rather than seeing that a choice has to be made between the two, the world is confused about even making that decision. We want to get you to the point where you're able to think with us. Well, that's really what it is. Like, we're just sitting here kind of thinking out loud, kind of making the point to you guys that what we're trying to say is think with us. Don't think against us. Don't think, okay, but go ahead and poke holes in what we're thinking, because we're not, neither one of us is claiming to be absolute truth. Shade's just identified the one who said he's the absolute truth, and we're going to hold that. We're going to hold, because we're biblical worldview people, we're going to hold that what he says makes more sense than what we have to say. So if you haven't checked out Jesus Christ, you need to check out Jesus Christ and check out what he has to say. See if the world holds together going his way. You see, it's not holding together very well, as is evidenced by all that stuff you were talking about. Absolutely. Right? It's not holding together very well by anybody else's word. And yet for thousands of years, things got better. They got better. We had the instances of child abuse go way down. We had the instances of orphanages come out because of Christians. We built hospitals because of Christians. We did things because the influence of Jesus Christ on people's lives made them want to make this world a better place. And we don't see that in cultures that have rejected him.
In the first man, of course it was God in the flesh, on record to defend a woman was Jesus. Right? And that was a bold thing that he did. I think people underestimate what happened there. He was by himself standing in front of the rulers of his time, which were judges, professors, political people, priests, right? The religious, the Pharisees. Yep. And they say, this woman has committed this such and such sin, and the law says we're supposed to throw stones at her. And he doesn't say no. He says, he who is without sin, cast the first stone. Boldly, by himself, says that. He could have been killed for that, but he still said it. And who was he defending? A woman.
Yeah.
Why? Because he knew that there was no position that those men had, or that anyone in the world had, to take that woman's life away. We don't have that jurisdiction. And what do? They all leave. And what does he say to her? He says, anybody here condemning you? She says, no.
See, the law said, and Jesus was, he did have the law on his side, just to make the point. Because they were not to bring a woman for that punishment. They were to bring the couple. So where's the guy?
Right, absolutely. And then these gentlemen that were making the accusation, here's the proof that they were guilty. They didn't throw the stones. That's the proof. In other words, they didn't look at each other and go, well, I've never done anything wrong. So they didn't do that. They went, I never looked at it that way. Essentially, and it says, but they were convicted. Their spirits were convicted. They knew that it was wrong. The only difference between them and Jesus in that moment was Jesus spoke the truth and lived it out. And that's the reality, and that's the kind of stuff that Christianity is loaded up with. But of course, there's always a smear campaign on. And it's always on Jesus, if you ever noticed. And there's no smear campaigns on let's say, other religions, if you will. It's Christianity. But that's biblical too, right?
Well, that's part of the dichotomy that's out there. I mean, the idea is that if you do divide the world, there's an attempt to divide the world in many ways. But one of the big ones is those who believe in Christ and those who don't. Because that's the one that he divides the world on. So if the author of all truth divides the world like that, that's the first dichotomy. That's the first one that really exists.
Well, he did. He says, "Think not that I've come to bring complete peace to the world. Right. I've come to create division." But what is he doing? He's separating the weeds from the tares. That's what he's saying. He's making a separation between the light and the darkness, right? And the reality is that the truth cannot be within the creation. It has to be in the Creator, right? and there's the biblical scriptures have such great validity to them, and yet they're being challenged by people who are writing books in the last 10 minutes. You know, honestly, like where's your basis of truth? Even you said, like, I've even heard some wild stories, like, this woman wrote a book that Jesus was married. Yeah, really? And where's the scriptural evidence on that? 2,000 years later, she found out, hey, there's proof that Jesus got married.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah.
I love that. There's more evidence of his existence and who he was on the Gentile and the Israelite side, by the way, because the Roman Empire was an empire for a reason. They kept amazing records, and so the evidence of his existence is what it is. There's no question on that. And the reality is we carved out time based on that, man.
Well, here's the thing. Like, there are questions.
It is time, by the way.
I'm going to argue with you just a little bit, because there are questions about it. The questions is, the real problem is that those questions don't have the kind of legitimacy that scholarship demands. So when you're saying that there's no questions, well, there's lots of questions. I mean, everybody out there has a different opinion about things. But it's not that whether you can question, it's whether or not your questions are reasonable questions. I mean, that really is, a guy named Lee Strobel wrote a book, The Case for Christ, and you should go back and look at it. He was a journalist, and he wanted to take his job was to fact check and to find stuff out. And he was an atheist, didn't want to believe, but he ended up being a Christian. And so the reason is because he actually took the evidence and started looking at the evidence. So evidence is out there, and whether or not you have reasonable questions, I mean, I don't think, this is one of the cool things about the difference between between the different worldviews that are out there, is that we will allow people time to not be who they are today, but to grow up. They're going to change. They will make mistakes. They need to be forgiven. I mean, that's one of the bases of being a Christian, is that the forgiveness is offered and people can change, and that God can do something with a person's life that they didn't have before. They maybe even were the exact opposite. Apostle Paul is case in point, right? The guy was a murderer. He was a killer who was a religious fanatic, hard right, if you will, okay, Judaism, and believing that anyone who believed in Christ ought to be put to death. So he made that happen. He was going about that, and then God touched his life, turned him around, and makes him a central figure in the New Testament. Well, how does that happen? If somebody put him on a political scale, they would crucify him and go, no way, look at all of his past. He's not fit for the Supreme Court, okay? But that's okay.
Ultimately, they did crucify, not on a cross, but they did behead Paul.
Yeah, well, details.
Ultimately, they did do it, right? So he did die for the name. There's no question.
Yeah, and if you look back, I have a book at home called Martyr's Mirror, which is an amazing compendium of all of the people who died for the name of Christ, up until about 100 years ago. I guess they stopped really compiling it. And everyone that they could identify who has been martyred is listed in there, and the circumstances of their death is listed. And they start all the way back with Stephen, the first martyr for the cause of Christ, and they go on through all of history. And you can find people's names that you wouldn't know today, and it's just a footnote, and it's just one of those mass executions of people just because they're Christians.
From my perspective too, some people will say, well, how do you know the Bible is true? The fact that it still exists makes it true, because human beings have never held on to anything that for 2,000 or more years. Nothing. Like, even Disneyland is dead. Like, nobody even cares about Mickey Mouse. You ever talk to your children about it? And he's not even 100 years old. Nobody, honestly, I don't even know how else to say it. The fact that that book still exists, and that there are still people who believe in the name Jesus. Remember, Jesus was not rich. He was not
politically connected.
None of that stuff that ultimately we usually think that's why we continue to talk about that person, right? So, all I'd have to say to you, like a lot of us, for example, like the Beatles. We used to like the Beatles, listen to the Beatles. Can you really picture the Beatles' music still being here 1,000 years from now? Because I don't mind telling you, I'm already talking to, younger folks that have no clue
You're
who
kidding.
they are. I'm not kidding you.
People
So-
don't know the Beatles?
Yeah, and that's music with film footage, right?
Yeah.
You've got these scriptures, and you've got this book, which, by the way, is not very flattering either. It's not the kind of book like, hey, eat cake all week and lose 30 pounds.
You know, I get
See, I like doing that.
Okay.
It's not that kind of book. It's that kind of book where you read it and you go, it says, yeah, everything you do that you think is good is like filthy rags. Well, this is nice. Let's read it some more. There's a good chance if you continue going on the path that you are, it's not going to work out very well for you, and bad things, and scorpions will attack your face. Oh, wow, this is wonderful. I'm enjoying this book. This is so lovely. It makes me feel great. There's nothing in this book that you can claim is pandering to you. It's not pandering to you ever.
True.
It's just telling you the truth, and it's not fun the entire time. In fact, a good portion of the time that you're reading the Bible, it's not saying anything that makes you go, oh, cry. Okay? It's not doing that at all. And yet, the book is still here. Why? Because ultimately, it is the truth, because Jesus said he is the truth, the way, and the life, and that's why it still stands. Because on any pragmatic earthly reason, that book shouldn't be here anymore.
I got one better for you too. I got one better.
Better than that?
Yeah, better than that. No. Listen. There are people who say, well, you know what? See, the problem with the Bible is it's a book that is a series of books. It has 40 authors. It has 40 authors in a human understanding, 40 different authors over a 2,000 year period of time. Okay, roughly. That's roughly the parameters on the Bible. 2,000 years, 40 different authors. So here's my challenge to you, okay? For those of you who don't believe that's a supernatural book, you go back over, I don't care how long you want to take, but it's got to be at least 2,000 years, okay? You collect 40 authors, the very best human minds that you can put together. I don't care who they are. You can take the best ideas of all these people. Go ahead and assemble them in one volume and give me a book at the end that totally agrees with each other, that has their facts straight, that is consistent morally, historically, scientifically even, because we can get into that a little bit later. But the point is this: there is nothing like it anywhere on the planet, and you could not, no matter who they are, assemble a book like it. You couldn't do it.
No, it's an impossibility. And the things that were foretold in that book that have come to pass. I mean, has anybody even asked this question? Look at Israel. Who was God's chosen people? The Israelites. Anybody knows that. Everybody knows that. Do you notice how the Israelites, Israel, the Jewish people, the Jewish culture, even today, I mean, with Trump, right? Everything that's going on, Israel. I mean, this is a nation that for 2,520 years they were not an independent state. And 3 years after the World War II, 1948.
But they're so big. I mean, it's such a large country.
That's the other thing. Yeah, like they're this big on the map. And yet everybody focuses on this land. And if you read the Bible, you understand why. But if you don't even bother asking the question, I mean, on all earthly levels, that.
You're really out to alienate a whole lot of people going to watch this, aren't you? I mean, you
by telling them the truth that 1948, 3 years after the Holocaust, who fought that war for them? And did you know that within 24 hours that country was attacked again?
Yeah.
Who fought that war for them? What did they have? A couple sticks and a pistol? They were being attacked. And by the way, 19 years later, I believe, it was around 1967, please double check my numbers, but I know there was a 6-day war.
Yeah.
And they weren't
67.
And even now, they're only 70 years old. And by the way, you should know that 70 is pretty important in the Bible. So, 70th birthday.
Are you into numbers?
God's into numbers.
Yeah,
that whole thing where he says, if you do the 2,520 years, if you map that out, remember in that scene in the Bible where he says, lay on one side for 390 days, and then lay on your other side for 40? Okay. And it turns out to 430 days. We know that is a day is for a year, because he says that in that section of time. If you do the math on that, he says, and you can read your scriptures. He says, I'm going to put you, because Babylon takes him for 70 years, and he says, and after that, if you hearken unto me, we'll be good. I'm paraphrasing, but he said, we'll be good. But if you don't, I'm going to multiply your punishment 7 times. And there was 360 years left over, because he did the 70, because 430 minus the 7, 360, times 7. It ends up working out to 2,520 years, bang on, and that's 1948. And he says, and then I'll give you your land back, and they get it in 1948, 2,520 years. I'm going to be doing a video on that real soon.
Cool.
And you have to, by the way, if you go to do the math yourself, you got to remember that we're calculated, this is where the bad guy messes with our calendar. You got to do it. You got to multiply the number by 365 and then divide it by 360, because God's calendar is 360.
Yeah.
For a year.
Well, there's a lot of things, and there's no question that the author of mathematics is into mathematics. I mean, I think that's a very cool thing. That's a whole nother show, though. We want to stay on point here.
Well, that's what edit is for. That's what editing is for. You just take this, and then we'll look like we're having clothes changes. We're changing our clothes.
I'll wear your shirt.
I'll wear yours. Okay. Absolutely. Right. We'll go inside out. But ultimately it comes back to just the authentication of the Bible, the truth of the Bible because if someone could find the lie in the Bible, they would have done it by now, and they would have made $1 billion doing it. So if they can't figure out the lie in the Bible by now to eliminate this thing, sorry folks, you are choosing. And so when he says, the gospel is going to be preached in the entire world, it's been preached in the entire world. And actually creation itself, is enough to make someone, I mean, people have to look outside, when they see an eclipse or the blood moon, you know what I mean? Who made that happen? I'm pretty sure, well, it wasn't you, was it?
Not to my knowledge.
Okay,
I might have had some dream sometime, and it could have affected somebody else's universe, but it only really affects the universe that I create. Don't you know that? So it wouldn't matter for you.
From my perspective, it was purple.
Okay. So we want to kind of come up to this and just basically say this: that the people who fight the idea that there are 2 points and one excludes the other are the people who prove the idea, because what they do is they show their intolerance for any other idea than what they have. And so they build the world on 2 camps. It's all about putting you in a box, labeling you, sticking you over here, and it's always us versus them. And that is the way the left works. I mean, that's what's going on right now in our whole culture. People are doing that because if they don't categorize you, stick you into an idea that they can argue directly against, they have no point. So the issue of, those are the same people that say, oh no, you have to be open-minded and you can't have an either-or thing, and they just prove that wrong. So that's really the point of episode 1 here, and we're trying to wrap that up and trying to bring that to a head and say, look, you know what? Look at your own worldview from its own position, from its own place, and be able to think with us. We're inviting you to think with us. We're not inviting you to come and be indoctrinated that you have to believe everything Shade believes. Guess what? There are things that I know that Shade believes that I don't believe. And there are things that I believe that he doesn't know yet that he won't believe. But that's okay.
And we're not. He hasn't found out that he's wrong yet.
That's just how it works. I mean, so someday
he'll get there.
And that's the beauty of it, is we both have the hope that we can grow. We both have, the idea that there is something to discover yet, and it's not. Neither one of us has the answer or the whole truth on this, but we know who does. So what's really cool is when you have the source of the answer, having the answer or understanding it all is not really that important. The idea is that what faith is really is that we trust that God does have the answer, that he does know beyond what we know, and that we can trust him with the knowledge. We can trust him with what he's going to do with the knowledge, that his intention is for our good, and he says that much. So that's what it's all about, and we're inviting you to think with us. We're inviting you to back to the series so that you can think with us on a continual basis. We really want you to engage and put your mind in gear, and if you have questions, we want to hear them. I mean, we really do. So we're gonna put an email, I guess, in the comments. We're going to put links in the comments in the future blogs to take you back to this one, so that you get the idea that what we're doing has this foundation that we want to resolve. We're going to illustrate these dichotomies in our society. We're going to illustrate these two sides of you, but we're also going to say, examine them from different worldviews and see what holds up, and see how we can think and how we can accommodate each other, and love each other anyway. Because I love this guy whether he knows it or not.
I love him a little bit too.
That's good. That's good.
Just a little bit. It's better that way.
Okay.
Cut. Next subject.
Yeah, sir. Okay.
Let's talk about, is it okay to gamble
Why?
with your wife's money? Anybody? I think that's okay. I'm pretty sure it's biblical. Let me look for it.